Welcome to Sparking Equity, a podcast highlighting strategies to ensure all students succeed and have the opportunity to learn. I'm Pedro Noguera, Dean of the USC Rossier School of Education.
And I'm Louis Freedberg, executive producer of this podcast.
Louis, today we have our friend, my friend Carlos Moreno, who is the executive director of the Big Picture Company. Carlos, it's a pleasure to have you with us. We had the chance to feature one of your schools in Philadelphia, where they're doing extraordinary work in arts education. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Big Picture, because it's an extraordinary organization.
So Big Picture Learning has been around for just under 30 years. We have worked tirelessly with school districts and systems to help in the reimagining of what schools can be, to ensure that they're fully student-centered, really hold students' interest in allowing young people to flourish by learning outside of the real world through apprenticeships and internships and such.
And now you have over 80 schools in the U.S. and over 100 schools throughout the world.
We're very proud of the footprint and the growth of the organization in that way.
So just to clarify, you're not actually starting schools from scratch, but they really are partnerships.
Yeah, and for us, it's about being able to develop the school and support the schools in implementing the design elements of Big Picture. So we would partner with a school or a school district to help either launch a brand new school or to help an existing school transform their practices to align with our Big Picture learning design elements.
And give us some idea of what those design elements consist of.
So one is the advisory, when you have a cohort of young people that are together and they move together and are supported by an adult, a teacher within the school who doesn't just deliver content or facilitate classes, but also supports that cohort of students throughout their journey or throughout high school to make sure that they are able to make it to the finish line and graduate. There's the internship component, which for us is very unique, and we deeply believe in the importance of young people being able to learn outside in the real world. An opportunity to explore what are some of the things that they might be interested in doing upon graduation, and also an opportunity for them to increase and expand their social capital by doing so and by working and learning alongside experts within their community.
To what extent is equity woven into what you're doing, and what does equity mean to you?
Our mantra at Big Picture has always been one student at a time. So it's really thinking about each individual student and their abilities, their skills, their gifts, their talents, their fears, their hopes, their community, and providing each young person what it is that he, she, or they need, deserve by doing that in a very individualized way that allows us to lift that up.
I've seen what Big Picture does, and in many ways, it's the student that drives the curriculum. Talk about that.
We start with really what are the hopes and interests and passions of that student and his or her family. Our goal is to build a full experience around those interests. And those experiences are inside and outside of school.
Just to help our audience understand, if a student is interested in baseball, they might actually study the history of baseball, study how baseball is organized and managed. Give us more, because one of the things I know is a lot of kids are fickle. They don't know what they're interested in. And so how do you handle kids who just come and say, I don't know what I like?
It's actually a really common question, right? And a challenge where a young person will say, I'm not really sure. We start asking young people oftentimes when they're in that space, what are the things that you enjoy doing, right? And let's start from there. And so speaking directly to your example of baseball, they might think about who are the folks that come from their background and culture that have had similar experiences. What are the other interests of those individuals as well? So the goal is always to branch out of that. And then ideally, that young person can have a shadow day, an interview with someone that works in that field. Now, obviously that varies depending on the community that they're in, but we've been pretty successful, whether it's urban, suburban, rural, about being able to match young people with really powerful mentors and folks that can support their learning.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago, I was at the Met School, which I think is the Met the original?
It is.
Big Picture School in Providence, Rhode Island, and met a group of students. And I met one girl, I still remember what she told me, even though it was over 20 years ago that I was there. And she said when she came in, she thought she was interested in fashion design. And she started doing an internship around fashion design. And then she realized she didn't like that at all. And the next year, she tried something else. And she started volunteering at a hospital. And it turned out her real passion was for hospice care. And she's now a hospice nurse. And I said, what led you to that? And she said, it was seeing people in need, and it really spoke to me and my interest in helping people in that situation. So again, I think it's tapping into the interest and the passion of students. That's what education should be about.
We have so many examples like that. I'll give you another one. I had in my advisory, when I was an advisor, 4 Black young women who all believed coming in that they wanted to work with young children, right? Because that's the extent of the experiences that they had babysitting. They thought it was quite noble to work with babies and young children at different stages. They each had an internship in 9th grade working with young children, and all but one of them actually switched and was like, this is actually not what I'm really interested and passionate about. We believe that's part of the role of high schools is to help young people figure out what are those things that you're really interested in, and not just because you studied it, but because you've had some actual experiential learning opportunities to explore and be like, I don't know if that's for me, right? I don't know if that's the thing that motivates me. So I feel like for us, that's a big part of our responsibility.
And that's so impressive. When a young person finds their passion, then they become self-motivated learners. And that's what I think Big Picture really does so well. And so my question is, how do you convince communities that this kind of model, because it's so different than the way we approach school, where we tell kids, this is what you must learn in 9th grade, 10th grade, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's so different.
I think we're fortunate now to have enough proof points to be able to say, hey, this is what the model looks like. Here are some examples of some young people. Here's some phenomenal data that kind of shows that this is a model and design that works really well. But even then, there are often the folks who might be a little, skeptical because this is a pretty non-conventional way of approaching it. And then they have that first exhibition. So exhibitions are where the young people are essentially defending their work. They're presenting, but also defending their work. I've seen and been witness to exhibitions where adults and parents are like, I have never imagined my child, my daughter, my son to be able to speak in this way, right? And also be as excited about their learning in a very different way.
It's at odds with what we do in a lot of schools where we reward compliant behavior.
Absolutely.
We reward kids who do what they're told. We don't necessarily reward independent thinking. And we see a lot of kids, even when they get to college, still not sure what they want to do. They get a degree and they end up working at Starbucks because they're still looking for their passion.
And sadly, we do that too often with our most marginalized young people in communities. In terms of access to this type of learning opportunity, where it's bidirectional and it's like the art of learning alongside a teacher or teachers or the adults, it happens. It just historically just hasn't happened enough for our people.
How do you measure the success of the organization? How do you know you're doing a good job with kids?
Yeah. So we're beholden to all the state and local regulations, so there's no escaping that. So in addition to your more traditional measures, we're proudly outperforming, and sadly, in another end, a lot of our comparison schools. But we're thinking about our young people longitudinally. So this is where we're following them to see what is it that they're doing after they've graduated us. Where are they 10 years from graduation? What can they point back to and say, hey, my high school prepared me in this way? And in what ways my high school did not prepare me well for this? And that data for us is really important. Ultimately, what we want to see is that our young people are thriving, they're living family-sustaining careers and lives, and they're able to really stretch out and add on to their social capital, right? Especially, again, when we talk about the most marginalized communities.
Well, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. The fact that you're growing says that there's a demand out there for this approach. And so, lastly, you've just written a book.
I did.
And just tell us briefly, The Soul of Leadership. I keep getting the names
it's all
wrong.
Right. I know. Let me tell you.
And I endorsed it. So,
brother, as a first-time author, it was a great process going through it with the publishers. So it is finding your leadership soul, what our students can teach us about love, care, and vulnerability in the field. It is a book that centers the stories of 3 young men of color that I knew intimately well from my days as a teacher and as a principal, who are sadly no longer with us. So it's a bit of a love letter to them and their families about all the gifts that they gave to this world, and to me specifically as the person that knew them so intimately well over the years, and then really kind of excavating some of those lessons in the book so that how we approach our young people, hopefully, teachers, school leaders, we can just continue to restore and bring their humanity into the work.
Well, thank you, Carlos. This was great to have this chance to talk to you about your work, and just appreciate you and all you're doing.
Appreciate you, Pedro. I just need to say, Pedro, you and I met at a Coalition of Essential Schools meeting in San Francisco when I was a teacher.
Wow.
And you have just been a beacon for me and for so many others. So I just needed to say that. I appreciate this time.
Thanks, Carlos.
Of course.
Louis, you had a chance to see a big picture school. Tell us what you saw. Did it sound like what Carlos has described here?
Absolutely, Pedro. I decided to visit MetWest High School in Oakland. It's a small public school with only about 250 students, but it also started in partnership with Big Picture Schools. It's housed in a bright, relatively new building not far from Oakland's downtown. There, the school is doing what a number of schools around the country are doing, rethinking the school day and trying to remove it from the straitjacket of 6 or 7 periods a day, each consisting of plus or minus 60 minutes, 5 days a week. This structure is a 100-year-old setup based on the so-called Carnegie Unit, also known as the credit hour, and it's had a profound impact on American education. And at MetWest High, they're breaking away from that structure. Twice a week, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, students are mostly out in the field, outside the school, participating in internships around Oakland and elsewhere, and that's beginning in the 9th grade. As Carlos Moreno explained to us, at the end of each semester, students participate in what are called exhibitions, in which they report on the internships to classmates and parents and other family members. When I visited the school, I sat down to talk with 2 seniors, Angelica Lopez and Montserrat Aguilera, about their internships, and they've had many of them since starting at the school in the 9th grade. Both were born and raised in Oakland, and in both their cases, their parents came from Mexico. Angelica's first internship was at a juice shop, but she's most interested in a career in health.
I just finished the 3-year internship at Children's Hospital, and this internship just allowed us to shadow doctors. We had different rotations. I got to see different departments, like the orthopedic department, the surgical department, and it just gave us an opportunity to see what life is like inside the hospital.
And Montserrat?
I've had several internships that was working in the office and some in schools, and right now I have an internship helping organize clothes for mothers who are barely going to have their first baby.
Both Montserrat and Angelica told me they really like the modified school schedule, which gets them out of traditional classes twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Most students are expected to show up at the school for at least the first 2 periods, and on those days they can do homework or get help with assignments from their teacher, otherwise called their advisor. And then they head out for their internships. They say these have not interfered at all with them meeting all their graduation requirements.
I think the school does a really good job in placing the classes, because we have periods and they're able to fit those classes in the periods. And Tuesdays and Thursdays, we do come to school for the first 2 periods, and people do have classes those 2 periods. So it doesn't really take away a lot from us. We're still able to get the academic education that we need.
It doesn't affect it because in the mornings are 2 periods. That's when we can work on work from classes if we actually need to finish up some work, and they do help us out on how to do our work before it's due.
In Angelica's case, her internships have been hugely helpful in shaping her thinking about her career choices in very specific ways.
I went into wanting to be a pediatric physician, but just seeing the workspace and what the doctors do, it made me feel like maybe I wanted something that gave me more hands-on. So I decided that I would rather go into trauma, seeing how these doctors always have to think quick, because I was able to see that in the departments I had. In the surgery department, a lot of the surgeries were trauma. So I just got to see my mentor and talk to her about her experiences, and it helped me shape what I wanted to be and change my plans.
And both of them say the internships have also been helpful in their own personal growth. Montserrat Aguilera.
I think internship has helped me out a lot because I am a very shy person, but internship has helped me out open up to my mentor or the staff from my internship. It helped me out communicate more with them, learn more things.
We learn how to travel, we learn how to be by ourselves, we learn how to advocate for ourselves, and it's just a new experiences that we get to have that other students don't.
After talking with the students, I sat down with Dr. Shalonda Gregory. She's the principal of the school, and I asked her how the students are able to get through the entire curriculum when they are essentially out of school 2 days a week?
I personally don't believe that you need to be in a classroom every day, all day to learn. There's learning that actually takes place at their internships that is just as valuable, if not more valuable. So what we try to be very intentional about, the 3 days that they do have core instruction, we have coaches from the district and within the school that work with the teachers to ensure that we are hitting the things that we need to hit as far as like the standards. How to really maximize the curriculum in their time when we have them on the 3 days a week, but also making sure that we help the students understand and the parents, because this is a concern of theirs as well, that we are actually taking the things that they're learning Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're also taking that out with them to their real world experience. So it doesn't just stop.
But are you still seeing that your students then are able to graduate on time? In other words, are the students, I'm just going to press you on this, able to finish the required curriculum, get the number of credits they need and so on in order to graduate?
Yeah, so our past year's graduation rate was 86%. Of course, I would like that to be higher. My goal is to have 100%. But yes, so our students are graduating on time at a high rate. And I think a lot of that has to do with the relationships they're building with their advisors. Our students are very much attached to their advisors and the community that we build. It's a really sweet place and sacred place and a safe place. Because of that, students are a little bit more motivated. They are more open to feedback and suggestions, especially when we're trying to put interventions and things like that in place to support them to ensure that they're being successful. And again, this design, especially the advisory model, helps us to be able to do that.
Could you just explain what the advisory is? My understanding is that every teacher is, or one teacher is designated as an advisor.
So all of our teachers are called advisors, and actually I'm considered a lead advisor. And then we have advisory 3 days within the normal schedule. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the beginning of the school year, they're in advisory for the day. And then once they secure their internship, they're only really in advisory Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But the reason why we have advisory is one, so that we can build community.
This whole notion of 5 days a week, 6 periods a day, 7 periods a day, 45 minutes or 50 minutes, that has been like standard and is still standard. There are people now beginning to rethink this, as is the case here at your school. How important do you think it is that we rethink that structure that really has been in place for, I don't know, a century?
Too long of a time. I think as we shift as a society, we need to also shift the way that we do instruction. I think that's been needed for a very, very long time. For our classes are 60 minutes, and we have 6 periods a day. You expect them to do that 5 days a week and not be bored? I think that's a crazy thought. We have to find ways to actively engage them. And me personally, for someone who grew up in a very traditional model, I went to schools in Louisville, Kentucky that were called traditional schools because they taught in a very traditional manner. And those schools were somewhat fun. I mean, I missed one day in 12 years, but that wasn't the same for my peers. If I talk to some of my peers, they will tell you like it wasn't the most enjoyable way to learn. And now that I've been an educator for 21 years and I have this great opportunity to lead this school, I have even reimagined like what my outcome could have been had I went to school like this, because I was a hands-on learner. I'm a curious adult, but I was a really curious child. And if I had the opportunity to really explore my passions the way that my students are able to do that, oh, what could I've been? Where would I be? I mean, I don't know if I would be sitting here speaking to you. I might actually be living the dream that I originally had, which was to be an endocrinologist, because I really would have had the opportunity to explore that and to build relationships with my mentors who could have possibly helped me to really see that dream through. So I really feel that's the reason why when you look at the research data, it shows that students that graduate from schools like my school are having higher graduation rates. Also going into whether it's a career like a trade or going into post-secondary like college, they're going and they're being successful because of this opportunity. There's like an unknown, unsaid thing that says schools should not be fun. And I think people work really hard at like not making school fun. But that's the reason why I love mostly like big picture schools or any non-traditional school that's like, we're not doing that. We're bringing the joy. We're bringing the fun, because kids need that. They need that joy. They need the fun. Learning is fun, but it's not fun when we're just sitting and doing it. Like, we need to get up. Sometimes we need to get out, and we call that leave to learn. We need to leave in order to learn, and then bring that learning back in, and then we talk about it. And then now we're all learning something else that we didn't know, because we're sharing all our different experiences, which is more abundant than just doing the cookie cutter way.
Well, we've been talking with Dr. Shalonda Gregory, who is the principal of MetWest High School in Oakland, and I really now have a much better idea of what it means to be a big picture school. So it sounds really remarkable, and thank you for your work.
Oh, you're welcome. We're really just out here just trying to change the world one student at a time.
Pedro, before we go, I'd love to get your thoughts on the bold move by MetWest and some other schools like it to disrupt regular school schedules that make it possible for students to participate in internships and other activities that don't really fit into the regular school curriculum.
So I've been familiar with the big picture schools for many years. I know the founders, and I've seen the schools, and I know what they do is they tap into the interest and passions of students. And I think that's a good thing. I think that when students are motivated and when they can see how what they're learning is applied in the real world, they're better prepared for life as adults. So I think this is the kind of change that more schools need.
To what extent, though, do you think, I mean, even parents, we're so used to 5 days a week, 6 periods, 7 periods a day, the periods of, 50 minutes, 60 minutes in the case of MetWest High. We're so used to that structure. To me, it was kind of thrilling to see that structure kind of being broken down. How do you sell that kind of idea to parents and teachers, in fact?
It's not going to appeal to everyone. I think there are a lot of people who are more traditional. They want a more traditional day. But there are a lot of kids who are totally bored, especially in the senior year, where it seems like a total waste of time. So I think something like this is really appealing. I think it's tapping into the interest and the passion of students. That's what education should be about.
And it seems so important in the current climate where we've seen chronic absenteeism. We brought all these kids back to school after the pandemic, and then we have this kind of crisis of chronic absenteeism. So something has to be done to really engage kids.
Absolutely. And by now we should know you can't make kids go to school, but you can make them want to go to school if you do things that appeal to their interests and make them feel as though what they're learning is meaningful and fulfilling.
On that note, we have to wrap up this episode of Sparking Equity. Kudos to the work that's being done at MetWest High. Thanks to our producer, Kobe McDonald. Thanks also to our sponsors, the Hewlett Foundation and School Services of California, and to USC staff for their support.
Please let us know of other schools or programs like Big Picture schools that are rethinking the school day to engage students in thinking about career pathways. You can write to us at sparkingequity@gmail.com. I'm Pedro Noguera.
And I'm Louis Freedberg. Thanks for listening.